Hello and welcome back to Red Hot Email Marketing Part 3. What we're going to do in here is we're going to show you how to start building lists. We've got quite a lot of different ways of doing it. First thing to note that good lists are rarely bought, but what we're going to do is show you how to build them probably quite slowly compared to the way some of you may want to work, but we're going to build you ones that actually work. So we're going to look at different ways of doing it. Some will be more effective for you because you might want to be in more of a hurry, or you might want to be more aggressive, or you might want to take more risks. So, what I'd always suggest with any of these things that you try them and you test what works best for you. But before we start, the first thing I really want to say is that for me, big lists are rarely better. Unless you've actually built it yourself, then don't assume that if you buy a list of 100,000 people that it's going to be a great list, because it's just generally not. So for me, the rule with list building has always been build slow, build strong. Do it consistently, do a little bit every day, and you'll get a much better list. Big, spammy, high bounce lists are no use at all to anyone. They really, really don't work, I've found. So where to start? There's quite a few different ways you can do it, so I'm going to go over each of these in turn. First of them is bought lists, which is where you obviously buy them from other people. Second of these is LinkedIn, which we'll go through. There's a couple of ways you can get data from LinkedIn. One I like a lot is called Zoom Info, and we'll go over that in detail. Then we'll look at scraping sites. We'll also look at lead forensics, which a lot of you will have heard of, and there's other IP-based sort of email and detail grabbers. We'll look at those as well. I've got a lot of experience using them, so and quite strong opinions about them. We'll look at the tech websites and how you can get data from tech websites, conferences, and finally, one that you might not be expecting is Telesales. So we'll look at how we can actually use Telesales to build lists as well. So let's go into those in turn. Now, the first of them was bought lists. Now, my advice here is always tread carefully. Whether you love them or hate them, there are loads of sites out there that will offer to sell you email and business data. And there's a real variation in quality. Now, bearing in mind, I actually run a site that sells email and business data, which is okay. It's not the best out there, I'll be honest. It's a bit dodgy. Some of it's a bit dodgy. So I'm about to close it down, I think, because it's not good enough anymore and the list is outdated and it's very, very hard to buy very good data these days. So the first question from that is really, with any details or with any data, check when the list was last updated. So in my experience, many online lists are years old. They claim to be much newer, but they're very rarely less than 2 years old, the data. So this means there's spam traps in there, and they're a real risk. And if you get caught in spam traps, as we said in the last lesson, there's a real risk your domain will get a very bad reputation. They're generally full of generics as well, so there'll be lots of generic emails in these lists as well. So if you really do have to use a bought list, then remove all the generics first. So that's the sales at, admin at, info at, those types of emails. None of the main email providers will let you send to those anymore anyway, so you really have got to get rid of them. The next thing to do is check the email broker's location. On my site, I've got a phone number, I've got an address, and mine is at least dead credible. You can speak to me and ask me about the data, and I'll be honest. But what I've found is that many of the online brokers don't have an office address, they don't have an email address. That's because they don't have any lists either, and they only actually start searching when you inquire. So a lot of them are sort of Indian subcontinent based, and they are literally just then going out. Once you give them the details, they will go out and scrape a list for you, but it is awful, awful, awful data, some of it. You also need to understand your usage restrictions. Most bought lists have usage restrictions, so you can only mail an agreed number of times. They have spam traps in them as well, their own version of a spam trap in them, a lot of them do, to find out if you breach this agreement. The ones with no usage restrictions are normally lower quality lists, as they're never updated. So the ones that, oh yeah, you can buy it, you've got no usage restrictions whatsoever, that's because they really don't care about their data. It's normally because it can be quite poor data. But saying all that, sometimes bought lists can give you a head start. So if you do use them, follow a few golden rules, which for me are, firstly, only mail from your dirty domain. And with the risk of spam traps being so high, mailing from your main domain is a real risk. I'd only mail from your dirty or scrap domain with any bought data, however safe it seems at first, and however credible that seller seems to be. Harvest all the out of office addresses. This is a really brilliant technique that a lot of people don't bother with. But when you mail these people, particularly if you mail from your normal sort of Outlook office or whatever on the first mailing, you get an out of office from people, an awful lot of out of offices, and if they left the company, then they say quite often where they've left or where they've gone to, or they say who is now in charge of their position. So you can actually just pick those email lists up or email names up, and then you can just add them to your own list. You need to import the list carefully, and I suggest you use a little bit of trickery as well in this. So, and whatever mailing system you're using, I would suggest you don't import it with the name of the list that you bought. So if it's an Experian list and you're trying to import the data saying Experian city data then it's going to be more difficult. So I would always change it to make it look like it's been signed up. So you could call it something like City X Business Show Sign Up. I'd also only import data in batches of no more than 50 names at a time, because otherwise, again, all sorts of flags go off, all sorts of bells go off, and warning signs go off, so you're likely to be very followed. And then following that, again, mailing in very small batches works too. So when you're mailing, I would just suggest mailing in batches of less than 20 at a time. I think it feels just more natural, and it is less likely to put flags up with the service providers, which means much higher deliverability. I think in the last lesson we actually looked at saying potentially mailing in less than threes, groups of 3, so it looks like a normal internal email. Certainly if you're mailing from Outlook, I think that's a very good idea. The next route is LinkedIn, which can work incredibly well. It gives you access to a business community of 120 people, and there's some great ways of extracting lists from them. But the first of them is to extract all of the data, export all the data from your own contacts into a new list. So on the next slide, I'm actually going to demo this. So I'll do a live demo so you can actually see exactly how to do it and show you line by line exactly how to do it. And it is quite complicated. They try to hide it a little bit, so but it is there it's easy once you actually know where the buttons are. Now, one thing to note with them is they do tend to be consumer or private emails, as an awful lot of LinkedIn users tend to use their personal email addresses, so that if they are contacted by headhunters or other recruiters, then it's not going to cause a problem at work. But this also assumes you've got a good and relevant list of connections on LinkedIn as well. So what you can't do is build connections fast. You can't just sort of like try and just connect with anyone, because if too many people say they don't know you, then your account will be locked down. And I know my cousin was actually locked off LinkedIn for 6 months because he was actually trying to build his list too fast, and he ended up not being able to get anywhere near the list. So on this next slide, there will be a little bit of a video insert now to show you exactly how to export your own data, and then we'll carry on the other side of that. Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to export all of your contacts from LinkedIn. I've got over 2,000 contacts, so it would actually make quite a good start on a mailing list, even though I wouldn't mail them all directly because most of them or some of them wouldn't be relevant. So what you have to do is you have to go to your LinkedIn page, obviously, and then go to My Network, click My Network, and then you have to see all of your connections over here. Can you see that? Where it says See All. See all on here. Now you get your list here, so you could actually pick them all out one by one, which would be a fairly slow way of doing it. Or you could go onto here, and over on the right hand side it says Managed, Synced and Imported Contacts. So you click that. This gives you your whole list here. It isn't very clear the way they do it, but what you next need is in Advanced Options, there is the little line down here which is Export Contacts. So you do that. And then on here, it's fast file only. This file includes connections, contacts, recommendations, messages, and profile information such as experience, education, and projects. You'll receive a link to download, and that happens. It says it will take 10 minutes if you read there, but it's normally pretty quick. So you just do request archive, and then as you can see, that's then saved, and that will download, and that's it. That gives you the start of a good mailing list. So now what we're going to do is with LinkedIn is we're going to look at targeting people by role. Because LinkedIn has got hundreds and hundreds of business, 120 million business contacts, you can target by role specific data. So assuming you make a search along the lines of something like finance director manufacturing, this will produce lots and lots of potential new connections. Now, in an ideal world, you already know that prospect and you can connect directly with them. That will then give you access to their contact details through the back end of LinkedIn. Next best is if you've got connections in common, so you can connect saying, hey, I see we both know X, Mr. X, Mrs. X, and I'm expanding my network, so it'd be good to connect. That works very well. And if these aren't for you, then the other way you can do it is joining groups. So if you've both got, you're in a marketing group, say, you can join the same group as these people, and then that might give you full email access depending on the way they've got their privacy settings set up. But it also makes it easier for you to contact that prospect with a view to connecting with them. So you can actually say, hey, we're both in the marketing group X. It'd be good to connect so we can do business together in the future. But one thing that's really important, I think, with LinkedIn is don't send in invitations without personalization, because otherwise you'll get a much higher level of rejections. And you need to send them. So for me, therefore, you send it from a laptop or a desktop, because if you send it from a phone, they've actually made it much harder to personalize the invite. And quite often I found if I'm connecting with someone on LinkedIn on my phone, then it actually connects with them before I've even had chance to, it sort of sends a connection before I've even had the chance to personalize it. So, but that's LinkedIn. Lots and lots of good ways of doing it on there. Just be careful, make sure you personalize. The next route is one of my favorites, which is called ZoomInfo. It's a website, zoominfo.com. Absolutely fantastic site. It's a huge co-created database. So the way it works is, to get access, you have to share your own database of contacts. Now, what I did was a little bit sneaky. I signed in with one of my very little used email addresses, so that way I only shared a very small amount of my contact data, so I didn't sort of hand everything over. Now, once you're inside, you can search by name, by position, by region, and you can even, down here, you can see you can actually put in the company name or just the URL of the company you're looking for, and it'll give you all the people within that organisation. So it's absolutely fantastic as a product. It's the most up-to-date list I've seen, and it's pretty much live. And you can see on here, over here, look, it says it was updated on the 11th of the 1st, 17, so it's relatively up to date, that one. But the nice thing here is you can click that and it'll give you their email address and phone number, and you hover over this and it actually gives you all the office details as well, so it's really up to date. Now, the other good part of it is you get about 100 a day. I think it's certainly 100 a week, but you get an awful lot of contacts that you can actually make through it. So I've never managed to use up all my contacts while I've been doing it, but it's really good and it's potentially very up to date. It's time consuming building this list, but it's accurate, and it's far better to have a good small list than a huge terrible one. I think that's really worth bearing in mind. So if you set yourself the task of just adding 10 new contacts to your list each day, you'll soon have a world beater. But I love that. I think it's one of my favourite products is ZoomInfo. It's a really good product. Now, the next solution, which sounds worse than it is, which is scraping data, which is where you scrape contact and email data from websites. The risk with it is that most of the data available is generic contact data, and there's ways you can do it. So you can actually spend time doing it yourself, or if you haven't got the time or you're too rich, then you can just set someone the task on Fiverr.com who can do it, but they're normally pretty basic. It normally only pulls down pretty basic data. If you want someone that's going to work a little bit harder for you, then I found that People Per Hour or Upwork allows you to actually appoint people and pay them the job to actually do it for you. And if you go to somewhere like the Philippines, you can actually get really good value from people there as well, so that works. Or there is a product where you can automate it. It is a paid one again, obviously, which is import.io, and that will actually go off and sort it for you. But all you need to do is you just need to set the parameters of what you're looking for and set whoever it is or whatever it is you're going just to go out and scrape your data. Remember, with scrape data, it can be very generic again, so because it's just ones that are actually available on the website. Now, next one is lead forensics and other IP-based sites. So these, to me, I don't know if you've seen them, but these to me promise the earth, but they rarely deliver much usable data. So the premise they have is that if someone visits your website, their system, you put a little cookie on your site, and it detects what IP they've come from, and it passes you the contact information. So there's a massive fatal flaw in their system, in that whilst it can detect if someone from a given IP has visited your site, they've got no way of detecting who it is from within that IP. So if it's a big company with 1,000 plus employees, it could literally be any one of those 1,000 people who visited your site. So, and the way they work is over the years they've gathered lots of names of people who work at that company via LinkedIn and through their own cold calling. So if you tell them your target is marketing or finance people within a company, when they get a hit from an IP, they will give you the name of the marketing or finance person for within that company, irrespective of whether it's them that's actually visited your website. And again, for me, experience says it's expensive. It's a minimum of $500 a month, and I tried it on a couple of different companies. I've never got usable data out of it, so I'm not a fan of it at all. So, but if you want to try it, that's why I said you should try your own things. If you want to try it, give it a go. But my experience is it's not good enough. The next one is tech websites. So if your product or service is only relevant to a particular technology or tech sector, then this is probably a good solution for you. So it's a brilliant way to pre-qualify your leads. So you only need to target the people who use your target technology. So if you're only after people who use Magento or WooCommerce or FIFO or one of those types of products, or any of those types of tech plug-in type products, then it will allow you to pick them out. So there's two fantastic solutions out there to look at, which are builtwith.com, which I've used a lot, and datanyze.com, which I've used a lot as well. And both of them are absolutely excellent. Neither of them are cheap, again, and they again are at easily $500 a month or more for the full solution. Builtwith can give you access to absolutely millions of lines of data though, so it's really very, very good. But they do tend to be mainly generic email addresses again, so it does normally also provide a contact phone number for the company. So what you can do is you can use this as a first pass to ask for the name of the right contact if you want to be that direct. So it's again quite an expensive route, but if your target is specific technologies, then I don't think there's many better ones out there than that. So the next solution is conferences and exhibitions, and I think there's two distinct opportunities here, which is either speaking at conference or just attending and then trying to get access to the delegate list. So tech or industry specific conferences and exhibitions, they're growing all the time. There's more and more sort of different little types of tech exhibition and conference, and they can allow you access to great mailing lists very quickly. But bear in mind, if the list is shared to all the delegates, then they will all be, anyone who's attended will be inundated immediately post-conference. So what you find is they quite often just switch off completely from it as well. So even though it looks like you're getting a great list, you're getting a list that's been absolutely hammered. So the secret is you absolutely have to plan your strategy before you get there. So preparing in advance is absolutely critical to give you first mover advantage. So if you get that list on the first day, then you want to be sending that mail out during lunch on the first day, really, or getting it there for the day they arrive home, however you choose to do it. So if you did attend the exhibition or the conference, then make sure people know you attended yourself too, and you're not just some sort of cold calling salesperson. Reference something that was said or an incident that happened at the conference to remind them of the event. And some conference organisers have wised up though and won't let you have this delegate information unless you're an event sponsor. So in the past I've actually ended up sponsoring an event purely so I can get access to that delegate list. That's actually better, even though it costs you more money, because you know that it's not being given to absolutely everyone. So whilst you might be paying a couple of pounds per contact, you know that they're good contacts. So the next solution is one that you probably won't be expecting, which is telesales. And if you're not comfortable with making cold calls yourself, then you can engage a telesales company and do the hard work for you. Now, good ones can make hundreds of calls per day for you, and in my experience will provide a very useful list of up-to-date contacts. Now, one that, again, I've been asking around, there's one, if you happen to be UK based, there's one called Buying Time in Winchester that a friend of mine's company's used, and he said it's been absolutely fantastic for them. It's opened absolutely loads of doors. So they might require a contact list from you, in which case you might need to buy one. If you do, then buy the best one you can possibly find and possibly afford, which really, so it always isn't always the cheapest. Now others are happy with just doing a job title and location and then build a list for you with those criteria. You just have to find one that works for you. It's not a cheap solution, but it's very, very, very effective if it's done right, and it's certainly been effective for me in the past as well. So that's it for list building. Let's have a quick look at the summary of that. Now, as I said, building a list takes time. It doesn't need to be instantly huge. You're far better to build a good list slowly than a bad one quickly. Now, there are free solutions out there, and there's some that can be quite costly. It all depends on how fast you want to work and how much time and money you're prepared to put into building that list. So, quick recap. Bought lists can be a useful start point, but be careful of the quality. Actually, one thing I didn't say before that you can do with bought lists is you can import them into Facebook to actually do lookalike lists. That's when they can actually be quite useful. So you can then target lookalike lists using social media as well. LinkedIn can be useful via your own contacts if you've got a really good database already, or simply building up your list by job title. Again, time consuming. Zoom Info is a brilliant and accurate solution. It's really one of my favourites, and it's worldwide. Scraping, a little risky because of the number of generic emails, but a good start point. Lead forensics and these IP-based grabbers I think are generally useless and expensive, but that's just my opinion. Tech websites I think are a brilliant start point for tech-based offers. Conferences, if you can get hold of the delegate lists, they can be exceptional lists, can be really good, as long as they're not being hammered by absolutely everyone on there. And then finally, telesales, not often considered, but I found them to be very, very cost effective when you've used them. So that's it for list building. In the next sessions, we're going to look at creating emails, we're going to look at personalization, we're going to look about when to send them, we're going to look at text-based emails, some examples, approaches, and then we're going to keep going on about this thing, which is trial, test, and optimize, which is just my favourite thing with email. You just don't know necessarily what's going to work, so just keep trialing, testing, optimizing. That way you'll have a really effective system. That's it for part 3. We will see you soon. Thank you very much.